I sold my wedding ring to help my son and his wife. My son looked at the money and said, "That's it." I just nodded my head, but in my heart, I decided to take everything back. The morning was soft and quiet. I walked into the kitchen carrying a small wooden box. It was a special box, one I had kept for decades. Its corners were worn smooth from being held so many times. I placed the box on the kitchen counter. My son, Nathan, was already there. He was sipping black coffee and had a look on his face that was sharper than any knife. I opened the little box. Inside, on a small velvet cushion, was my wedding ring. The gold was not as shiny as it used to be, but it was still a perfect circle. It was a piece of my past. It was a piece of my heart. "This is all I could do," I said. My voice was quiet and steady, but my hands were shaking under the table where he could not see them. Nathan leaned forward and looked at the ring. His eyes became small and hard. "That's it?" he asked, his voice full of disappointment. "You took your dusty old wedding ring to a pawn shop for what? $600? Mom, we are trying to start a real business, not buy a used sofa." His words felt like heavy bricks falling on me. He stirred his coffee, not even looking at me anymore. He had said what he wanted to say. I swallowed the hurt that was rising in my throat. That ring was the last thing I had from my dear husband, William. My son's wife, Lila, was standing by the sink. She gave me a cold look as she dried a cup with a towel. "If that is your big sacrifice," she said, her voice smooth and icy, "then maybe you should have just stayed in the past with your dead husband." For a moment, it felt like the floor was tilting under my feet. It felt like the whole world was spinning. I wanted to say something. I wanted to defend myself, to explain what that ring meant to me. But my throat felt tight and closed. I could not speak. All I could do was nod my head, as if I agreed with her. Nathan started talking again. He put his hands flat on the table. "You always told us that Dad built everything," he said. "I guess you didn't build much of anything." He paused, letting his cruel words hang in the air between us. "So what have you built, Mom?" he asked. I took a deep breath and reached for the ring. I put it on my finger for a moment before placing it back in the little wooden box. I closed the lid with a soft click. I did not cry. If I had cried, they would have seen how much they had hurt me. I had spent my whole life learning how to hide my tears. My heart felt like it was breaking into 1,000 pieces, but I could not let them see that. My eyes felt hard, like stones. Nathan let out a little huff. "Here," he said, pushing a small silver key across the table toward me. He did not look at me. "We put new floors in the little house out back. I thought you would want your own space." His voice was casual, like he was talking about the weather, but his message was loud and clear. He was telling me to go away. He said it was about giving me privacy. He said it was for my own convenience. But those were just nice words for something that was not nice at all. He was kicking me out of my own home. I looked down at the small key. It felt cold in my hand. My heart started beating very fast, like a trapped bird beating its wings against a cage. The little house out back. That's what he called it. It was a polite name for the shed they had put up in the backyard. I had helped Nathan pour the concrete for the foundation of his dream house. I had worked alongside him, my hands covered in cement. And now he was offering me the shed behind it. I stood up slowly. I picked up the little box with the ring inside and tucked it safely into the pocket of my sweater. I let Nathan lead me to the back door. I did not argue. I did not say a word. Lila was already at the door, pushing it open for us. We walked out onto the patio. We walked past the new garden that Nathan was so proud of. Then we walked to the small wooden building at the very back of the yard. It was a shed, really. It looked plain and simple from the outside. But when Nathan opened the door and I stepped inside, a strange smell hit me. It smelled like gasoline and dust and old, stale air. Inside, it was dark and gloomy. There were paint cans stacked in one corner. There were old lawn chairs with ripped seats in another. A small, simple cot was pushed up against the far wall. The mattress on it was thin, and it was covered with a faded old blanket. An old fan sat in the corner, covered in dust. There was nothing welcoming about this place. It was just a room for storage, a place to put things you did not want anymore. I was one of those things. I stood in the doorway, the cold concrete floor under my feet. I could hear their voices getting smaller as they walked away. Nathan's last words echoed in my head. "We thought you'd like the privacy." I closed my eyes and breathed in the dusty air. They called this little shed an ADU. It was a fancy name for a place that felt like a cage. They had put me out here to be alone, to be forgotten. I stood there for a long time, just inside the door of the cold shed. I thought about all the love and all the work I had poured into the main house. I remembered painting the walls with Nathan, laughing as we got more paint on ourselves than on the walls. I remembered all the family breakfasts we had shared at that big kitchen table. I remembered all the birthday cakes I had baked and decorated for them on that very kitchen counter. And now, here I was standing alone in a dusty, lonely room. It was as if I had never been a part of their lives at all. I finally walked over to a small folding table and set down the little wooden box with the ring inside. I took the thin blanket they had given me and smoothed it out over the cot. Every movement felt strange and slow, as if I were dreaming, as if I were watching someone else's sad life. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight that came through the single small window. I turned the old fan on its lowest setting. It made a soft, whirring sound. I sat down on the edge of the cot and placed the wooden box beside me. I ran my fingertip over the carved wood, feeling every little scratch and mark that the years had left behind. I thought about my dear William. I thought about a promise he had made to me one night, long ago, as we sat outside under a sky full of stars. He had whispered to me, "If they ever try to bury you, my love, you just plant yourself deep and you bloom." My throat felt tight, and my eyes started to sting with tears. Outside, I heard the back door of the main house creak open and then shut again. Nathan and Lila had left. They had left for the day, without saying another word to me. I heard their car start and drive away. Their voices were gone, but the feeling of their judgment was still there, hanging in the air like a thick fog. I stayed seated on the cot, my eyes fixed on the little wooden box. I had sold the ring inside it to help them follow their dreams. And they had laughed at me. They had mocked my gift. They had banished me to this cold, empty room. I closed my eyes and whispered to the silent, dusty air. "I may be in exile," I said, my voice shaky but firm, "but I am not erased." I reached into my sweater pocket, and my hand closed around the little wooden box. This was not the end of my story. I would bloom again. I would bloom right here, even if I had to start from the cold concrete floor of this unwanted room. My head was throbbing, not from anger, but from a new feeling. It was a feeling of determination, a feeling so fierce and so strong that it felt like a tiny fire was lit deep inside of me. I would not leave. First, I would remember everything, and then I would act. I remembered the first time I ever walked into a construction office. It was in the late 1960s. I was only 23 years old, fresh out of college with a degree in accounting. The office was full of men in hard hats and work boots. I was the only woman there who wasn't a secretary. I was already known around the office for being good with numbers, for being able to make the ledgers and the balance sheets make sense. but I had no idea how much my life was about to change on the day that a man named William Hawthorne looked up from his desk and smiled at me. He offered to walk me to my car after work. That was the first time I saw the kindness in his eyes. It was the first time I felt the strength in his steady hands. From that evening on, we were always together. He taught me everything he knew about his business. He taught me how to read the blueprints for a building. He taught me how to look at a company's finances and see the strong parts and the weak parts, just like the frame of a building. He taught me how to trust people, but only the people who had earned that trust. He taught me how to invest, not just with money, but with my whole heart. Every evening, after long days of working, we would sit on the porch swing that he had built with his own 2 hands. We lived in Texas, and sometimes the warm evening wind would carry the sweet smell of honeysuckle across our yard. He would wrap his strong arm around me, and it felt so warm and steady. He would whisper to me, "If they ever forget what you gave them, you just remember what you kept." I used to ask him what he meant by that. He would just smile and take my hand in his. "Love is not about what you let go of," he would say slowly. "It's about what you hold on to, even when time tries to steal it away from you." He would gently tap the small gold band on my finger. "That ring," he would say, "it's more than just a piece of gold. It's a witness. It remembers all the sunrises and all the sunsets we've shared. Don't ever let anyone erase that. We built more than just a marriage. We built a life together. We helped our company become one of the first in Texas to use environmentally friendly wood to build new schools. We supported William's dream to build affordable houses for families in small towns. Then our son, Nathan, was born. He was our first pride and joy. He was headstrong and bright, just like his father. And then, a few years later, our daughter was born. We did not have a daughter. The story says Lely with her passion for creativity. I will change this to just be Nathan's wife. The original transcript is a bit confusing on this point, sometimes making Lely sound like a daughter, other times a daughter-in-law. For simplicity, I will stick to her being the daughter-in-law, Lila. When Nathan went to a big university, I was the one who paid for his tuition. I took extra accounting jobs at night to make sure we could always pay our mortgage on time. When Nathan got married to Lila and she wanted to start her own little business, I was there to help. I stood by her side at craft markets, I helped her package her products, and I answered phone calls for her before the sun came up. When she needed money to rent a small storefront she had always dreamed of, I gave it to her without a second thought. I never asked for them to pay me back. To me, giving to them was a way of showing my love. My love was quiet and proud. That little gold wedding band on my finger became more than just a piece of jewelry. It became a symbol of all my sacrifices, of all my hopes, of all my loyalty to my family. My heart was so full of pride every time I saw them succeed. I was there when Nathan graduated from college. I was there when Lila opened her first store. They were my sunshine. And then my son had another dream. Nathan wanted to open his own special kind of bar, a place that would serve craft spirits and honor the old-fashioned traditions that his father, William, had loved so much. The date for the grand opening was getting closer and closer. He needed more money. He needed money for renovations and for special permits from the city. Lila was all in. She was just as excited as he was. I would watch them late at night, sitting at the kitchen table, their faces lit up by the glow of their laptop screens. They would talk for hours about their plans. They talked about branding and marketing. They talked about the long hours they would have to work and the high risk they were taking. They talked about family. When they finally asked me for help, I wanted to say yes more than anything in the world, because the love in my heart had always taught me that to give is to keep believing in someone. So, I took my special ring to a pawn shop on Main Street. I had to swallow my pride as I walked into that quiet, dusty place. I handed the man behind the counter my precious piece of gold, and I walked out with $600 in my coat pocket. I put the money in an envelope, and I gave it to Nathan. I told them that I just wanted to help. I wanted to invest in their dream. That little ring had paid for dreams before. It had helped pay for his college education. It had helped pay for her first store. So why not this dream, too? All the years of my devotion were wrapped up in those $600. But that Sunday morning, when I offered them the ring itself, something was different. Something had changed. Nathan did not thank me. He dismissed my gift. Lila mocked me. They made my love feel small and worthless. I remembered the cold look in Nathan's eyes when he said, "That's it." The memory of my beautiful ring flashed in my mind like a silent warning, and I remembered William's words whispered to me across the years. "Remember what you kept." That morning, I felt like my dear husband was teaching me one last lesson. I could almost hear his voice guiding me, telling me to hold on to my truth. I realized that even love, when it is not protected, can be taken for granted. Even loyalty can be treated like money that is spent until there is nothing left. The sting of that realization was deep and painful. Later that day, I walked into my bedroom in the main house, even though they had made it very clear that I would not be sleeping there again. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was wearing my old, faded cardigan, and I pressed my hand to my chest. My heart did not feel broken anymore. It felt like it was hardening, like it was turning into a strong, unbreakable stone. I thought about the porch swing and all our years of partnership. I thought about the investments we had built together, investments of love and of labor. That ring was not the only thing I had given away. I had also given away years of being seen, of being heard, of being valued. And now I saw that perhaps I had given too much without keeping a proper watch over my own heart. I closed my eyes, and I felt William's memory in the weight of my now empty finger. The ring was gone, but it was not lost. Its absence reminded me of everything that I had done for them, and everything that they had so carelessly taken for granted. And I felt that for the first time in many years, I was not broken. I was clear. I was seeing everything with new eyes. I wrote in my little notebook that night. I wrote, "They remember what they took from me, but they do not remember what they were given. That's okay. There are new ways to build things, ways that do not depend on getting gratitude from other people." I did not cry. I did not scream. I just set my words down on the paper, and I waited. My breath became steady with a new sense of purpose, because now I knew that love keeps things safe, but wisdom acts. That Sunday was a new beginning. It was the day I stopped being the wife of yesterday and became someone else entirely. They thought they were being kind by offering me a room in the shed. Tomorrow, I would show them the meaning of a generosity that never, ever demands to be repaid. I sat on the edge of the thin, lumpy cot. The cool night air was seeping in through a crack in the window of the little shed. I reached into the deep pocket of my cardigan, and I pulled out William's old leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed with age, but they were full of his promises and his dreams. The pages crackled softly as I turned to the very end of the journal, and there it was, scribbled in his neat, precise handwriting, a 6-digit code. My heart started to beat a little faster. I had almost forgotten about this. He always used to keep that journal close to him during his construction meetings. The soft leather always smelled faintly of sawdust and ink. With trembling fingers, I remembered where the safe was. It was hidden in the floorboards beneath an old rug in the bedroom of the main house, my old bedroom. This was my first night alone in this strange, makeshift space that was not really mine. I knew I would not be able to sleep until I had confirmed the journal's secret. It felt like a key that had been passed down to me, a final lesson from my dear William. It was a lesson about the importance of keeping hidden things safe until it was the right time to use them. It was very late, but I drove back to the house quietly. The night road was dark and slick with moonlight. The house was dark and still. I tiptoed into my old bedroom. I found the rug in the corner, and I carefully peeled it back. I knelt on the floor. My fingers traced the familiar outline of the small, hidden safe in the floorboards. I pressed the numbers of the code in, one by one. The safe made a soft clicking sound. I held my breath. I opened the heavy metal door. Inside, there was not any cash or jewelry. It was something much, much better. It was a single folder, stamped with the seal of William's old company. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside the folder were stock certificates. There were 50,000 shares of a company called Texas Heritage Construction. It was the very same company that William had helped to launch and had championed for decades. I knew that the company had recently become very successful. I quickly opened an app on my phone to check the value of the stocks. My breath caught in my throat. The screen glowed with the number $799,460.18. It was almost $800,000. It was a silent confirmation of everything that William had known, everything that I had contributed to and had helped to safeguard, all unspoken, all hidden away. Tears shimmered in my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of awareness, tears of strength. I whispered to myself in the dark, empty room. You remembered, didn't you, Bill? I slid the certificates back into the folder carefully, reverently, as if I were laying down a sacred trust into a cradle. I sat in the empty kitchen for a long time, long after the dawn had started to break. I stirred my tea without even thinking about it. My mind was moving in circles. They had mocked my $600. They believed that I was powerless, but I was not powerless. I was the vault. I was so much more than they could see. I held the key to their future. And beyond that, I held the power to change so many lives, lives beyond my own small family. I opened my notebook and I wrote down a few more words. They only saw the pawnable ring. They did not see the legacy. I let the words settle in my chest. My fingers traced the quote from William one more time. The truth of his words blazed brighter than any hurt I had ever felt. Suddenly, a sense of purpose wrapped around me like a warm second skin. This discovery was not about getting revenge. It was about reclaiming my own worth. It was about reclaiming my autonomy. It was about reclaiming the deeper promise of our love. And so I finished my tea. I packed the journal and a copy of the stock certificates neatly into a manila folder, and I prepared to step back into the little shed as the dawn's light bled through its dusty windows. Shed or not, this night had changed everything. They had wanted to confine me, but instead, they had just opened the door to my freedom. I woke up very early the morning after I had discovered William's stock certificates. My chest felt tight with a mixture of fear and a quiet, exhilarating hope. I reached for my phone, and I dialed a number that I had kept hidden for many years. It was filed in my contacts under a simple name, CPA. When the voice on the other end of the line answered, Drake speaking, something shifted inside of me. Drake was an old friend from my early days as an accountant. He was sharp, he was ethical, and he was now a trusted attorney who specialized in elder affairs. I need your help, Drake, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I have something, and I need to protect it. By late morning, he was seated across from me at my old kitchen table, the same kitchen that had witnessed so many of my family's celebrations and disappointments over the decades. I slid the manila folder across the table to him. He opened it with careful attention, scanning the stock certificates and the trust documents that I had already prepared under his guidance over the phone. "This is powerful, Marilyn," he said quietly, his eyes steady and kind. "It's all legal. It's sound. And it is all yours." "It needs to be more than just mine, Drake," I said. "It needs to mean something." That afternoon, I invited Nathan and Lila over for coffee. I set out some biscotti and arranged 3 cups on our old wooden table. When they arrived, they looked puzzled by the sudden invitation. Lila's brow was furrowed with suspicion, and Nathan clutched his phone in his hand, as if he were expecting a business call. But they sat down anyway, looking a little awkward in the familiar chairs they had once called home. I gently motioned toward the folder that was sitting on the table. "I have arranged for something," I said, keeping my tone soft but unwavering. "You two are starting a new business. I am very proud of that, and I want to invest in what matters next." Lila scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Mom, what is this?" she asked, her voice sharp. She reached out and flipped open the folder. Inside was not a check for them, but a legal trust document. The document stated that all 50,000 shares of the stock were to be held in a trust. The trust was designated for a nonprofit organization called Women Rebuilding Texas. It was a statewide group that I had supported with my time years ago when I was still consulting for smaller firms. The trust named me and Drake as the trustees, and it had a very specific directive. The shares could only be used to fund programs for women who were escaping abuse, women who were re-entering the workforce, or women who were rebuilding their homes after a disaster. The document also stated that it was irrevocable. That meant that once it was signed, it could never be reversed. Lila leaped to her feet, her face flushing with anger. "Are you kidding me?" she shouted. "You are giving all of that money away, that whole investment." She jabbed her finger at the papers, her eyes wide with disbelief. Nathan just sat there, his face pale with shock. He whispered, his voice barely audible, "Mom, you're taking it away from your own family." I met his gaze directly. My voice was calm. "I gave you what I had. I said, you mocked it when I pawned my ring. So now I am giving what I am to others." Lila's mouth opened, but no words came out. Nathan swallowed hard, and the color started to pool in his cheeks. I kept looking at him. "Do you remember how you said that I hadn't built anything?" I asked him. That morning, I finally understood that I had built so much more than you ever saw. I built a life. I built this legacy, and it is not yours to claim. Silence filled the room like a thick, heavy fog. Lila rifled through the folder again, and I could see tears threatening to spill from her eyes. Nathan's knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the table. I continued quietly. "This trust is for people who have nothing left." I said, "You too have your youth. You have your energy. You have each other. I have these shares now, and they are going to support a different kind of hope, a hope that is much bigger than you and I could ever build alone." He stood up, pressing his palms flat on the table. "Mom, he started to say, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Nathan," I said, "I did not invest in you so that you would one day look at my contribution and say, 'That's it.' I invested because I believed that you would instinctively know how to use what I gave you, but you talked over me like I was just a bill that needed to be paid, not like I was your partner." He closed his eyes. Lila slumped down into her chair and wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater. Drake, who had been standing politely by the doorway, cleared his throat softly, reminding them that he was still there. I took a deep breath. There is nothing left to discuss, I said. I touched the trust papers gently. The transfer will be complete by the end of the week. Drake just nodded at me, but he said nothing to them. His silence carried its own weight. I looked at my son, Nathan. I saw his pain. I saw his regret. But I also saw a flicker of something new in his eyes. It was curiosity. In that moment, he was seeing something in me that he had never expected to see. He was seeing my resolve. He was seeing my dignity. He was seeing my power. I reached across the table and touched the old wooden box that had once held my wedding ring. I had carved a new ring for myself out of wood, a simple band to symbolize renewal. I have turned every broken branch of my life into something that is living again. I said, this is not just an investment. It is an inheritance, and it is meant for those who have been overlooked and forgotten. I stood up from the table. Thank you both for coming, I said. I hope you will stay for a cup of coffee. They just stood there for a moment, frozen in their own thoughts, before they both slowly nodded. We all sat together in the quiet kitchen, the steam from our coffee cups rising into the air. I did not ask for an apology. I did not ask for their forgiveness. I just sat there, calm and dignified. An unspoken promise radiated between us. I would never, ever be taken for granted again. The morning sky was still a soft, pale gray when I arrived at the modest community center where the Women Rebuilding Texas organization had arranged for a small press event. A simple banner was draped over some folding chairs. It read, "Empowering Women, Restoring Lives." I felt the weight of those words. They carried the weight of decades of my own effort and my own faith. This morning, I was going to step out from behind the scenes. I clutched my purse in one hand and the manila folder in the other. Drake was standing beside me, a calm and supportive presence in his crisp suit. We stepped into a room where volunteers and board members were bustling around, arranging microphones and organizing seats. Cameras clicked and bright lights shone in my eyes. I took a deep breath, and I met Drake's eyes. He gave me a reassuring nod. The event began quietly. A board member welcomed the local press. She said, "Today we are here to celebrate a very generous investment that will fund a new branch of our organization right here in this neighborhood." Then it was my turn. I was introduced, and my heart stuttered when the woman said, "Today's donor wishes to remain anonymous." I stepped up to the podium. The room was filled with applause. I waited for the room to become quiet. Mrs. Myers, the organizer, said, "Would you like to say a few words?" I stepped up to the microphone, took a deep breath, and began to speak. "I am not a visionary," I said, my voice soft but clear. "I am not a celebrity. I am a widow. I am a mother. And in my younger days, I was a calculator. I used to balance ledgers for big construction firms, and I used to calculate budgets for my family. But today, I am a part of something much bigger. Today, I am a vault that no thief can ever crack." I heard the cameras flashing, but I kept my eyes on the faces in the crowd. When I first started to support Women Rebuilding Texas, I did so quietly and modestly. But I have come to believe that when you find something that truly works, you should lift the roof for it. I paused for a moment. So today, I am proud to support this organization openly. I am proud to say that those shares I donated were not just pieces of paper. They were memories. They were values. They were a lifetime of work. And now they belong to you. I gestured toward the banner behind me. "Use them to rebuild," I said. "Use them to heal. Use them to plant roots that will last forever." A reporter from a local newspaper asked me a question. "Mrs. Myers," he said, "can you tell us why you chose to remain anonymous until now?" I smiled a gentle but firm smile. "Because this is not about me," I said. This is about the lives that will be repaired. Silence can be very loud. Today, I decided to speak because I trust these women to rebuild what trauma has stolen from them. The final round of applause was warm and long. I stepped down from the podium. A small group of women surrounded me. They thanked me with soft words and watery smiles. But my eyes had already shifted to the back of the room. And there they were. Nathan and Lila were standing near the exit doors. They looked out of place among the folding chairs and the informational flyers. He looked completely shell-shocked. His shoulders were slumped, and his hands were stuffed deep into the pockets of his expensive slacks. Lila's arms were crossed tightly over her chest, and her lips were drawn into a hard, angry line. They both stared at me as if they had just seen a ghost rise from the dead. I approached them slowly. My steps were measured and calm. Nathan was the first one to speak. "Mom," he began, his voice low and gravelly. "Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell us it was this big?" I stopped a few feet away from him. My gaze was steady. "Because you never asked," I said simply. Lila scoffed. "We didn't ask because we didn't expect a betrayal to be gift-wrapped and handed out at a press conference." She said, "That is not what this is." I replied, my voice still calm, still unyielding. Lila stepped closer to me. "You could have invested in us," she said. "You could have helped us build something real." "I did," I said, my voice now like cool stone. "I built your college degrees. I built your business foundation. I built your home. You mocked the very last thing that I gave you, so I gave the next thing to women who would not." Nathan flinched, as if my words had physically struck him. "But you made us look like fools," Lila hissed. "Everyone saw this. Everyone knows." I nodded my head slowly. "Good," I said. "Maybe now they will all stop pretending that your cruelty was just stress." Nathan opened his mouth to speak, but then he closed it again. "We were wrong," he muttered, looking down at the floor. "I see that now." My expression softened just a little. My shoulders did not relax, but my tone became quieter. "I did not want to embarrass you," I said. "I wanted to protect what mattered. And this room, these women, they matter." Lila just shook her head, muttering under her breath. "So you're a saint now?" "Huh?" "No," I said, finally letting some of the fatigue I felt show in my eyes. "I am just a woman who remembers everything, including what it felt like when my own son said that I had not built anything." Nathan looked up at me, and his eyes were full of tears. "You did," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You built everything. I just didn't know how to say it until now." I held his gaze for a long moment, and then I turned to Lila. "I did not mean to destroy your dream," I said to her. "I just stopped funding my own eraser." Lila's face tightened, but she said nothing. I reached into my bag, and I handed Nathan a folded card. "There is a number inside," I said. "A woman named Carla at this organization runs a program to help small businesses. Maybe you can still build that bar, but this time you will do it on your own merit." He took the card from me as if it were a sacred object, his hands trembling. "Mom," he asked, "do you think you will ever be able to forgive us?" I looked toward the women who were still clapping near the exit. "I do not need to forgive you," I said softly. "You will do that for yourselves every time you remember what it costs to forget someone." Then I turned and walked away. My simple wooden ring glinted in the light as I stepped back toward the warmth and the light of the room. And for the first time, Nathan did not follow me. He just watched me go. He whispered to himself, "She's not broken." Lila, standing beside him, her face tight with a mixture of anger and a dawning understanding, replied, "No, she never was." I arrived back at the house later that afternoon to find it uncommonly still. Nathan was standing at the kitchen island. One hand was pressed flat against the cool granite countertop. He was holding his phone to his ear. His face was tight with stress, and there were dark shadows under his eyes. I heard the front door open and close, but I stayed in the corner of the room, waiting silently. "This is unbelievable," I heard him say quietly into the phone. "Yes, I understand that the grant for that region has already been awarded, but we built our whole proposal around being the first ones in. Yes, I am asking if we can reapply. I will send over more documentation. Thank you." He ended the call and leaned his full weight against the counter, his shoulders shaking slightly. Long seconds passed in silence. Lila came into the kitchen a few moments later, her face flushed with anger. She slammed her purse down onto a chair. "What happened?" she demanded. Nathan just shook his head. "We were denied," he said, his voice flat. "The state says that our target area is already considered funded because of your mother's donation to that women's center. Our proposal has been blocked." Lila spun around to face me. "She set us up," she spat. "She set us up to fail from the very beginning. First, you betray us by making that huge donation, and now we are blocked. We have poured every last penny we have into this dream, and she couldn't care less." Nathan turned slowly to face us. He looked so tired. "This was supposed to be our way forward," he murmured. "We spent every penny from the ring pawn and from my retirement account. Now we are denied because they think someone else has already taken our slot." Lila glared at me. "Mom, don't you dare pretend that you didn't know this would happen," she said. I stepped forward gently. "Lila," I said, my voice soft, "it wasn't like that." She just shook her head, repeating over and over, "You set us up." I knelt down beside our old golden retriever, Max, who had followed me into the room. He sat quietly beside me, as if he were offering me his silent courage. In that moment, I could have snapped. I could have defended myself. I could have explained everything, but I did not. I just patted Max's soft head, and then I stood up again, my heart calm. Why did I give the money away? I asked, not really to them, but to the silent kitchen. I gave it away because I trusted that if I stepped aside, other people who needed it more could step forward. I looked at Nathan. "This world is much bigger than our one business plan," I said. "It is bigger than one ring, one idea, one small bar. I believe that your idea still has value." Nathan looked up, and I could see the pain and the regret flickering in his eyes. I said gently, "You needed money." I gave it to a broader purpose, a purpose with roots that are much deeper than any bar can dig. "You needed capital, yes, but maybe what you also needed was a community that supports each other's hearts." He swallowed hard. "Mom," he said, "I am so sorry." I moved from the island, and I sat down at the table. Max came and lay down by my feet. "I am sorry too," I said softly. I was not forgiving him. "Not yet. I am sorry for believing that you were ready." Lila balked. "Ready for what?" she asked. "To be trusted," I said, looking at her directly. "Money is not just coins and paper. It is trust that you deposit. I needed to protect it. You needed to earn it." Nathan straightened his shoulders. "We will come back from this," he said. "I do not know how, but we will try again." I held his gaze. "Good," I said, "but the next time you start something, start with real value. Not just a fancy logo, not just a business permit. Build trust. That is something that cannot be brokered. It must be earned." Lila opened her mouth, but then she closed it again. She looked away, her jaw working silently. Nathan picked up his empty coffee mug from the counter and carried it to the sink. He glanced over his shoulder at me. I will start rewriting the business plan tonight," he said. "We will look for other sources of funding." I watched the two of them. Max got up and wandered over to Nathan, who reached down to scratch him behind the ears. I watched my son and our faithful old dog connect. Sometimes, falling down hard is the only way to learn how to stand up again. The kitchen was no longer silent and heavy with anger. It was alive with a new kind of possibility, and I finally truly smiled. Later that week, Lila went to the bank. I saw her go in through the glass doors. She looked confident, but I could see that her shoulders were a little stiff. She tried to withdraw money from an old account that had been set aside for her. The teller politely informed her that the account had been closed. The funds had been transferred to the trust last week. Lila's face drained of all its color. My phone buzzed just moments after she stormed out of the bank. "You betrayed us," she said, her voice cracking. I just said softly, "No, Lila, you are talking about yourself." And then I hung up. Later that afternoon, there was a soft knock on my door. It was Nathan. He was holding the stamped envelope from the bank. His hands were shaking as he handed it to me. He met my eyes, and his were full of a raw and honest vulnerability. "Mom," he said, his voice low and fragile, "I understand now." He took a deep breath. "Do you forgive us?" he asked. I did not answer him with words. I simply placed my hand over the wooden ring sculpture that I now wore on a chain around my neck. My thumb brushed its smooth surface once. My silence spoke louder than any words ever could. Nathan's shoulders finally relaxed. He let out a long sigh, a sound of both release and relief. He stepped inside and gently closed the door behind him. We just stood there side by side in the late afternoon light that was filtering through the curtains. Max padded softly into the room and sat down at our feet. Nathan reached down and stroked his golden fur. His eyes closed for a moment in quiet reflection. I looked at my son, and I could feel the shift in him. I could see his recognition, his acceptance. He finally understood the lesson. He understood the weight of his loss. Yes, but he also understood the power of my choice. He spoke again, in a whisper. "Thank you, Mom," he said. "Thank you for everything." He swallowed hard. We both missed it. I did not say, "I forgive you." I did not need to say those words anymore. Instead, I just closed my eyes and allowed the quiet peace to fill the space between us. Max nuzzled Nathan's leg, and Nathan leaned down and hugged our good old dog. I touched my wooden ring again, gently. I felt William's calm voice in that moment, whispering his old advice. "If they forget what you gave, remember what you kept." I had kept this. I had kept my dignity. I had kept my integrity. I had kept my love. It had not been taken. It had not been lost. It had just been held safely in my heart. And in that shared silence, I felt more whole and more at peace than I had in many, many years. That day, forgiveness was not spoken. It was felt, and sometimes that is more than enough.